Make it plain.
Make it plain.
M.I.P.
With Masamela Matfumo.
Mark Thompson.
Make it plain.
Get woke.
God bless you. Get woke. Folks, MIP is now COVID-free, meaning free to all subscribers as we navigate this pandemic. We're thinking about everyone, and we've got to get through this together. So for a limited time, no fee to subscribe to Make It Plain on your favorite podcast app. Once again, everyone, it's a pleasure to have our friend and colleague and comrade on with us from pressrun.media. I hope you've had a chance to subscribe by now and support independent journalism, just like Make It Plain. This is all independent journalism. His journalism, though, is journalism about journalism, and it is fearless. No other way to describe it. Our friend Eric Boehlert back with us again. Hey, buddy, how you holding up in the pandemic and everything?
Good. Everything's good. It's funny, when this all started, we were all told, this was going to be a bell curve, and right. Bell curve for everywhere on the planet except here. And it's a bell curve in New York, which is nice. Bell curve in New Jersey and Massachusetts and Connecticut. But boy, you look at those graphs and you talk about where the United States is now. And you talk about, you and I have talked about, others have been much more aggressive talking about this war Trump is waging on this country. And that COVID chart says it all to me. That just says it all.
It does. It's scary with the help of these governors.
Yeah.
And this argument that, well, there are only so many more cases because we're doing more testing. Right,
which is a joke.
Which is an admission. We really would rather cover this up.
Yeah. Right. It doesn't talk about the obviously the number of testings doesn't explain it. And down in Florida, DeSantis is grasping, and he's putting everything on the death rate. It's only 2%. It's lower than other states. As I said on Twitter, we'll check back in 2 weeks and see, if your entire defense for rushing to reopen, did you see yesterday his Florida education commissioner signed an executive order.
Right.
All schools, private, public, must open full in person by mid-August.
Yeah.
And so anyway, that's, for DeSantis to now hang his hopes on the death rate's not so bad when they've got 11,000 new cases every day. It's amazing. And Republicans want to show up a couple weeks and have a convention in Jacksonville. Jacksonville is actually one of the top 5 or 10 hotspots in the entire country.
And a couple of the older senators are saying they're not going.
Yeah. Nope. As I said, I'm not even sure that convention is going to happen. If it does, it's going to be Tulsa too. I mean, it is going to be the saddest collection of half-filled, empty arena that we've ever seen in American politics.
Well, here's the other thing, ladies and gentlemen, and for those of you Republicans, just a word of advice. It's not going to be a contested convention. You already have an unopposed nominee.
Right.
Why go and get COVID for that?
For the dear, right? It's for the dear leader. It's all right. There's no functioning reason to have a convention. You can yes, there's platform stuff, and you can do all of that wherever you want. The convention is astounding. New York Times reported the Republican Party already raised and spent $40 million on the Charlotte convention that is not happening. There's going to be a couple backroom meetings still in Charlotte. Charlotte says, you're not having a convention here if you're not going to social distance, no mask. Republican Party then goes and finds Jacksonville. They spent $40 million on a Charlotte convention. It's not going to happen. They have to start from scratch to raise money for Jacksonville. It's supposed to be in 3 weeks, 4 weeks. You and I have been attended conventions. I've never worked on one. These are things you plan 18 months in advance.
Oh, yeah.
The logistics, the hotels, the transportation, the agenda, the speakers, everything. They don't even know what they're doing, and it's 3 weeks away. I'm fascinated by it because to me, it's such an anecdote. It's such a view into a political party that has lost its mind and can't even do the simplest things like have a convention or cancel a convention.
Right.
Because the dear leader demands that he stand on a platform somewhere this summer and accept the nomination.
So at least 18 months.
Oh.
So, the parties pick the cities, sometimes even a couple of years in advance.
Sure.
So this is just really insane.
Right.
But they want to have this fiasco. They want to risk people's lives. I think that speaks to what he's been consistent about and people's lives. Professor Brittany Cooper has a term that she's been using a lot lately called necropolitics, which is really the politics of death.
Yeah.
And, bargaining in terms of sort of a triage politics, I guess, what lives matter. And I believe and we'll get to our favorite subject, the Bellwether media, they won't reveal this.
Right.
But as much, and I'm going to talk to you about Russian bounties too, but I'm sure someone in one of those White House meetings, Eric, has gone on the record at some point and said that if this virus kills people, at least it will kill some of the people also that will vote against Trump.
We don't like
it's like if you're in a war,
right, and
that first flank goes out, right, some of them are going to be sacrificed,
right,
for the whole offensive that day.
Right.
And I'm sure this White House has taken that into some type of consideration in ignoring the dangers of this pandemic.
Well, we certainly see more and more evidence that it's affecting people of color medically, just let alone economically. It's absolutely true. Look, in March, I was talking and writing about how Trump gave a stand down order for this virus invasion. And it's absolutely true. Front page of the New York Times today, talk about the massive shortage of testing. It was either Phoenix or another city. They opened for testing. 8 a.m. Within 5 minutes, they were out of tests. Had to send everyone home. Some cities, people are waiting 8 or 10 hours. So this wasn't the White House failed in March and April, and they've scrambled and they figured out what they're doing. They have never wanted to figure out what they're doing. When you're waging war on America from within, your plan isn't ever to help.
Right.
It's to let this thing run wild. We still don't know why he's doing this, but there's no question he gave a stand down order, and we continue to see the effects of it. And as you say, we'll talk about the press. The press still doesn't really want to grapple with this very dark realization of what's happening in this country. This isn't incompetence. In April and May, there was a lot of press stories about how Trump had missed the warnings about the pandemic. He doesn't really read the briefings. And the suggestion was, if he had focused on it, we'd be okay. If he had focused on it, there would have been a different government response. That's a fantasy that the press wants to advance, that he is a rational person with our interests at heart, and if he can just focus, we'll be okay. He's not going to focus, and he doesn't want to help us. That's the bottom line.
And we know how he dropped the ball, because
every possible way.
Yeah, when Obama left, he was so against everything Obama did.
Right.
And I don't think we've ever heard about a presidential transition
quite like that one,
where a pandemic was center stage in the transition.
Right.
I mean, that was pretty serious. I mean, heard a lot of, but we never heard that before.
Right.
And the Obama administration say, look, y'all, something is out here. We need to get ready for it. This is a possibility going into, this new decade or what have you.
Right.
And
we built this infrastructure. Here
right,
it is. And
right.
Trump does what?
Just shuts it down.
Shuts it down.
Shuts it down. So I want to stay on this for a minute. Let me just go back for a second. There was also reporting that in one of the early meetings with Fauci, did Trump not ask, can't this just wash over the country? Do you remember that?
Yeah.
But I'm still unclear about what that meant. Did that mean just let it have its course?
Yeah.
Or what? Is that what wash over means?
Well, I'm sure he has no idea, but the SARS wasn't I don't know if it was technically a pandemic, but that actually happened, right? They were working on a vaccine. We had a lot of deaths. We couldn't contain it. Obviously, nothing to the magnitude of this, but it shocked everyone in that it eventually did disappear. Every expert who looked at COVID said from January to today said there's no way this is going to be a SARS-2. Again, I don't think Trump even knew that. But that was the notion that like somehow got in his head that it's kind of like the flu. He's still saying it in July, right? He's still saying, he told Fox in the last 3 or 4 days, it'll disappear. It'll disappear. So again, that's what surrender looks like. That's what a stand down order looks like. The mayor of Phoenix said, I need help from FEMA. FEMA said, no, we're out of the COVID business, i.e., we're good. We consider it over. So you have government agencies that are telling municipalities that are suffering through hotspots, we're not going to help you. That's not incompetence. That's not distraction. That's a conscious decision by the federal government to stand down and watch this thing ravage the country. And again, we don't know why. We may never know why. We may never know why Trump does so many things that he does. We don't know why he has never condemned those Russian bounties from a week or two ago. Yeah. He never once said, if it's true, I condemn it. He wouldn't even do that. Doesn't make sense.
Would he have lost if he had just said that?
Yeah.
Who in his constituency,
right,
Eric, would have voted against him for saying, if it's true, this is bad?
If his constituent have won in the Kremlin, right? No, so none of it makes sense. And it's all, it's 2020. This isn't 2 weeks after the election where people are like, oh my gosh, I'm gonna embrace this conspiracy. And I think, I think this was all an international. We have the evidence for 4 years of what's happening, and the press still wants to talk about, well, he's kind of distracted, or still. I mean, there was a CNN report yesterday. Oh, the White House aides are coming up with a new policy about masks. Okay, this is literally 20 weeks late. There is no functioning White House. As Jay Rosen, the New York NYU media professor, has talked about for a long time, there is no White House. There is no functioning White House.
Right.
DC press clings to this notion, right, that those West Wing halls are filled with activity and the best and the brightest of the Republican Party, and they're having meetings and they're talking policy and agenda and they're whispering to Trump's ear and they're concocting these great plans. And the entire White House is this madman tweeting in the dark. There's no, but I think news outlets don't really want to acknowledge that. They want to prop up the idea that it's eccentric, but it's still a White House. We still talk to aides off the record. They're working on things. They understand what's going on. They're going to try to turn Trump around. They think they can do. Are you kidding me? Are you kidding me?
I was talking to someone else this morning, Eric, and I think too, it's emblematic not just of the Beltway press, but there's this culture, this mentality politically in America that there has to be two things, and they have to appear to be viable. So, and forgive me, but I'll even criticize Obama somewhat. After 2008, James Carville sat in my studio and decreed that the Republican Party could just be vanquished.
Uh-huh.
My response to that was, well, people have a problem with that, need to understand that the Democratic Party is actually several small parties in one. That's why we never get along.
Right.
African Americans, women, Black women, labor, students. I mean, you could break up the Democratic Party like, the telephone company was broken up and we'd have a multi-party democracy. But the Obama administration and they admitted they read Lincoln. We're students of Lincoln. And he didn't vanquish the Confederacy, punish them. Right. We brought them back.
Right.
You see what that caused. So now we're fighting about taking down Confederate statues that never should have been put up in the first place. And still a Confederate electoral college system that the Supreme Court has held up this week.
Right.
So the Confederacy, even though it lost, it's still around. And the Electoral College is emblematic of it. So it seems to me it's sort of the same thing with the flailing White House. We've got to present, and when I say we, I don't mean Eric and me, y'all, but I'm talking about this meeting. Everybody. We've got to present that there's something here, that it's an alternative, and it's like it's all made up. You're right. I'm willing to bet you can hear a rat pee on cotton in the hallway of the White House. I bet you it is so quiet in there and nobody knows what to do. Yep. Any average person is probably looking and trying to figure out, do I start looking for a job now? What's a stupid question? What job am I going to hear back from first? I'm sure they've already sent resumes out. Do I risk finding another job by staying in here another day? And it's also an unwillingness. The party that started with Gingrich and continues today, and we see it on the Hill, is a party of literally not wanting to work.
Oh yeah.
There was a little children's cartoon, the pirates who don't do anything. This is the part, they don't want the government, so they literally want to get paid a taxpayer's salary to not function and produce. Yes. And the Beltway Press won't cover that either.
Right, and then they can say, look, the government doesn't work, and sow the seeds of discontent. We've talked about how this is clearly the most radical president in American history in terms of the power he has assumed, and the press just never. So he came in with this radical approach, obliterated, shredded every possible protocol, not just dealing with the press, but the entire federal government. And the Beltway Press didn't react in any radical way at all. And so he comes in, changes everything, rips it up, attacks them, etc. And they're still going to use the same mechanisms that they used to cover Obama. They're going to talk to aides off the record, and things like that. So it was a complete failure. It's 2020, and this summer, I mean, Trump is really doubling down on the racist stuff, on the Confederate flag. Yeah. And the New York Times, what was the headline yesterday? Trump race-based appeal to white voters. Just a total gobbledygook, because they won't call him a racist. I turned on CNN, racially tinged, racially inflammatory. We're still doing this. This is 2020. He is a proud racist. I mean, you cannot view this any other way. These are not things that slip out. These aren't things where, the New York Times editors always said, well, I can't really read his mind. You can read his mind. He's tweeted 100,000 times, 50, I don't know how many times he's tweeted. That's all his mind. He doesn't try to hide it. This isn't a dance he does with anyone. He is just a stone cold racist, a white nationalist. And for the press in 2020, Soledad O'Brien yesterday made fun of, the Times headline, and I responded. You get the feeling the press is just running out the clock on all of this. They're not going to call him a liar. They're not going to call him a racist. They're not going to call him a white nationalist. They're not going to question his mental stability. They don't want to make those tough calls, and they and they just want him to leave the stage so they never have to. And I guarantee you, if Joe Biden makes something up, he will be called a liar in February of next year in the White House.
No question.
So I feel like they've made this bizarre euphemism decision to play these idiotic word games. They don't have the courage to change now. It is going to get so much worse between July and November in terms of the campaign. Trump is going to run in terms of just guttural race, and they've made this deal with the devil, literally, that they're just not going to be accurate, and they're just not going to describe what they see in front of them because they're too nervous about offending a Republican president.
You retweeted Jennifer Rubin, who wrote phrases such as racially charged, racially insensitive, should be dropped from journalist lexicon. Raising racial tensions is devoid of meaning. What happened to the AP style manual?
Yeah,
we need a style manual on this.
Well, they did it. They addressed this last year, and the AP style manual, which is what the Bible that every newsroom in the country follows, they very clearly said if something is racist, if a comment is racist, if a tweet is racist, say so. Drop these euphemisms. Now they said we don't think you can. They said don't really call people racist because that does go to motivation. But if someone says something or someone does something, call it what it is. And I thought that was very interesting. And they specifically were talking about getting rid of these euphemisms. And obviously the number one person that applies to is Trump. But it's been a year since the AP changed their style guide, and there's been virtually no change. So that's why I really feel like the press is they've dug this hole willingly, and they're just going to stay in that bunker until November until Election Day. But here's another point. And people say, why does it matter? Why does it matter if you call him a liar? He's not going to stop lying. Why does it matter if you call him a racist? He's not going to change. And the argument is this is just a semantics argument. It's no big deal if we call him a racist. Well, if it's no big deal, then call him a racist. Prove it. You can't say it's no big deal, but we're not going to do it. And secondly, we have a violent white nationalist movement in this country, and we have seen examples where they have taken inspiration from Trump's own rhetoric. So it's important to call him a racist and not dance around it, because we have, how are we going to stop this white nationalist terror movement? And that's what they are. They're terror cells. If we're not willing to call the leader of the movement a racist. So it's not just a semantics, and it's not a partisan debate. There are long-term implications from this, and it's important. That's another reason why it's important for journalists to be accurate in their descriptions.
You've also called out the coverage of the 4th of July weekend, Mount Rushmore, total debacle. Yeah. You wrote CNN labeled the address as impassioned.
Yeah.
The Associated Press, which you're speaking of, reported Trump was merely offering a discordant tone. The Politico.
Yeah.
Quote, Trump seeks to claim the mantle of history in fiery Mount Rushmore address. U.S. News and World Report, President Donald Trump delivered a fiery speech in Mount Rushmore. The New York Post, Trump blasts left-wing cultural revolution in fiery Mount Rushmore speech. Trump's salute to America features fireworks, fiery speech. The Voice of America. So did a memo go around for everybody? Fiery.
That's been a lazy crutch for at least a year now. Divisive, fiery. As I point out, it's not even accurate. That speech at Mount Rushmore was the opposite of fiery. He was catatonic. He was listless. He was slurring his words. He got almost no reaction from a die-hard crowd that was willing to risk its health to show up. It was like a funeral. I mean, it was so low energy, it doesn't even begin to describe. So right out of the gate, fiery is an absolutely false description. It's just not, that was not a fiery speech. There was not yelling. There was listless beyond. Secondly, more importantly, probably, it's just a lazy crutch. It's just a lazy crutch. That was a frightening, authoritarian, borderline racist. His speech on Saturday was openly racist. I felt like the Friday night speech was dangerous. He was suggesting sort of demonic liberal forces that want to basically brainwash your kids and overtake corporate America. Basically, urging civil revolt in a civil war. That's not fiery. And he looked unhealthy, to say the least. I mean, he was slurring his words. He was a very strange pale of kind of sweaty orange. Any other president who appeared like that in public and spoke like that in public, having just had trouble walking down a ramp, if this was Joe Biden, 55 stories every day. 55 stories every day. What is wrong with Joe Biden? He's not functioning. He can't speak. He is listless. He can't walk. You and I both know. Hillary Clinton fainted 2 steps or stumbled 2 steps on the way to her SUV during the campaign. And, that was a 14-day story.
And she, remember, even before that, she leaned on a patio chair.
Right.
And they said it was a walker.
Oh, yeah.
They cropped it, remember? Even before the faint. Are we still seeing as many stories about Dems in disarray too?
That's less because the press does worship poll numbers, and these poll numbers are. I don't think the press is really being truthful about what these poll numbers suggest. They are astonishing. Even when Jimmy Carter lost in a landslide to Reagan, we didn't really have as much polling. That it kind of came as a surprise on election night. Not that he lost, but that he lost like he did. This is shaping up to be something like that if these poll numbers are accurate. And again, nobody should go to bed confident based on polls in June and July. But Trump trailing by 8 points in Florida. So to go to your question, the Dems in disarray, those articles have withdrawn because it's really difficult to prop that beloved narrative up. When Biden, if you go to RCP and look at the polls, he has led in something like 67 straight polls. It's hard it's become almost impossible. They did it as long as they could until about 2 or 3 weeks ago. The press laid into the idea that Biden was running a bad campaign. He was locked in his basement. Trump was stealing the show and all of that. So we're seeing less attempts to tell that story just because the poll numbers are at times just shocking.
Lastly, though, can we reconcile the New York Times, cutting him a lot of a pass, but they still broke the story on the Russian bounty.
Yeah.
So is the New York Times newsroom bipolar, or just I think there's always it's peculiar to me what exactly they're.
It's very peculiar because 90% of the New York Times is great. The business, the business staff, the Metro, it's the DC bureau. And yes, I understand some of the national security staff is within the DC bureau that broke the Russian. But I'm talking about the politics, White House campaign. That's always been the problem, the cultural problem at the New York Times. That small but very influential part of their newsroom, they represent basically all the problems. And so, yes, there is great, amazing coverage of Trump. There can be from the New York Times. Usually it's entrepreneurial and investigative, like the Russian bounty story. But that none of it springs from kind of like the core political team, and certainly doesn't spring from the White House team or folks who cover the campaign. So that's always been their Achilles heel. If their campaign and their White House coverage, not just talking about Trump, but for years, was as good as the rest of the paper, New York Times would be unbelievable. But there's something weird in that DC bureau, Dems in disarray. Republicans are always outsmarting Democrats. That has been their telltale for at least since the 90s. Yeah. And it's obviously passed down from generation to generation. because the same New York Times that was nailing Bill and Hillary to the cross 25 years ago, those people aren't there today, but they have picked up the culture. They have picked up the culture.
Yeah. Folks, once again, support independent journalism. Eric Boehlert's pressrun.media. Check it out. And I'm telling you, it's therapeutic because it lets you know you're not crazy.
Oh, good. Yeah.
We don't need that in this. A lot of us are still locked at home and, cabin fever and everything. So to convince yourself you're not crazy, subscribe to pressrun.media. If you would, please, ma'am, please, sir. Eric, always great to talk to you, buddy.
All right. Have a good week, my friend.
All right. You too. God, you are our refuge. Send our ancestors to guard our doors. Cast out this virus from our communities and our bodies. Heal, bless, and protect everyone listening and their loved ones. Thank you for listening to Make It Plain and Get Woke. Remember to listen, like, and subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and wherever you get your podcasts. If all minds are clear, it has been made plain.